Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1391. The topic is Q&A and the title is, How Should I Eat and Train When I'm Sick? Now, with COVID going around everywhere, pretty much everybody's probably gotten sick at some point here, and that recently happened to one of my online clients. They got COVID and they kind of feel a little under the weather, a little hard to breathe, like sniffles, and don't feel great, but they don't feel horrible. And they have a home gym, so they don't have to necessarily kind of quarantine and miss the gym. They're just a little uncertain as to what to do in regards to managing their food and their training when they just don't really have any appetite. So their calories have dropped, kind of food was scarce the first day, and they're like, well, do I train? Do I not train? What do I do with my food? So I thought it'd be fun to kind of, maybe not fun, be helpful to touch on this topic and just kind of talk about what can we do when we don't feel great? How do we, not lose our gains too much? How do we not lose progress? How do we not lose our goal? So in general, the first response I usually tell people is to know what matters most. When we look at nutrition, it's important to understand, no matter where we are in our nutrition, that we might be working at some complex details. We might be pretty advanced. Like a lot of the people I work with are personal trainers, so we're well past the basics of nutrition. But it's good to never lose sight of the basics or never lose touch with the basics. So what matters most is calories. They absolutely have the most important factor. If everything else is in place but calories are not right, you're not going to really get any of the results you want. So calories are they're not the only thing that matters, not at all, but they are very impactful. They're the first thing that we should focus on. So we've talked about in podcast 1232. It's a nutrition podcast titled Start Here. I tell you literally the steps you should take when you're trying to take control of your nutrition, exactly what steps to take and what to listen to and do everything. And you'll notice in that one that the first component we look at is calories. So that's where our focus needs to start. The second most important thing is protein. The third most important thing is timing. So those are the things that I tend to look at. This is also like the protocol I go through whenever I don't feel well. So this is exactly what I do, and this is what I tell all my clients to do. So know what matters most is calories, protein, timing. For calories, just drop all the rules. It's unlikely when you feel well that you will want to eat what you're supposed to eat. So drop all of the rules and consume whatever the hell you can get in your face. It's very unlikely as well that people will overeat when they're sick. Typically people undereat, and that's going to cause problems if you have kind of like a couple days in a row of that. It's just going to cause you to have a lot of, lowered energy, slower to kind of bounce back to yourself. You're going to have a lot of water retention, even some fat storage, the days coming back into regular eating. So 3 or 4 days without proper food can kind of wreck the next 3 or 4 days, and you kind of end up losing a week and a half, 2 weeks, just from a couple days of undereating. So it's important to not undereat as much as we can. So if we drop all of the rules, drink whatever calories you need to. If you need to drink a gallon of Gatorade, do what you got to do to get your calories in, even if it comes from liquids. And if all you're hungry for is carbs, then just eat carbs. It's very important that you reach at least 70% of your usual calorie target. Now, is 70% some kind of magical number? Not really. There's a podcast we did way back when, actually about 1,000 podcasts ago, was podcast number 390. It was a nutrition podcast titled Proper Nutrition for Sedentary Workers. And at that time, the podcast, it was about, if people sit on their butt all day, just doing computer work, they often underate. And what we talked about in that podcast was that about 70-ish%, and there's always, pluses and minuses and things, but to give you a ballpark idea, 70% of the calories you need per day is because you're alive. Literally, you're just alive, and you're burning 70% of your calories. So if you were to lay in bed and just be alive, you would need at least 70% of the calories that you eat every day. The rest of the 30% comes from, if we're up and active and moving, if I'm blinking my eyes, moving my muscles, walking, and then if we add in what's called like thermic effect of food, which is how many calories you break down to digest the food that you ate. Then there's exercise-induced, like exercise activity that adds on top of that. So roughly about 70% of our total calorie need is from us just being alive. So if you eat under that, you're really, really going to negatively impact the way in which the body sees calories. It's going to try to reduce using calories for any process that is non-essential. So anything that doesn't keep you alive, like beating your heart, that's necessary. Your body's going to fuel that. So what it doesn't fuel is maybe like, growing your hair, your skin, your nails, doing other odds and ends and blah, blah, blah. So it thinks in itself, it's like, oh my gosh, like our energy is super scarce right now. What's the minimum things I need to do with the energy so I can hurry up and try to save as much as I can to fuel those minimum things? So for example, if I go a day or two really low in calories, our body's going to start to go, well, hey, I don't have a lot coming in. The amount that I have now seems very important. Let me see if I can start to figure out how to save that. So it actually starts to work against fat loss. So often people undereat thinking they're promoting more fat loss, but you're actually going to cause a reduction of fat loss. It's actually going to be even harder and harder and harder when you go back to regular eating. So you want to understand that 70% of my calories is a pretty good range to try to get them in. If you're like, well, if all I'm drinking is sugar and eating carbohydrates, I'm going to get fat. No, we just said you're only going to eat 70% of your total calories. There's no surplus. There's nothing for your body to make fat out of because you're not in a surplus. So you only have to worry if you go over 100% of your usual calorie target. Now, if you're getting over 100% and it's all sugars and carbs and stuff, probably not the best fuel source. You're just going to feel like crap. You're going to be super water bloated, but it's not going to necessarily pack on a bunch of pounds of fat. So you might see a change in the weight scale, but that's due to water retention, not due to fat formation. So that would be a big goal for us, thinking of nutrition, is let me drop all my rules, consume what you can, try to get to at least 70%. Okay? Now, when we look at protein, your body isn't going to want it. The body is busy fighting off the sickness. It wants to be left alone. It does not want to try to process very complex foods, which is why it would prefer liquids and carbs, because liquids and carbs are easy to break down. Whereas proteins and fats are very annoying to the body, so it's not going to really want to do that. So you'll notice, like, okay, I can drink some sugars, I can eat carbs all day. My body's okay with carbs, but I try to eat one bite of chicken and I want to throw up. So that's going to happen when you don't feel well, and that's pretty much your body just telling you, I don't want to devote energy to this. I am busy, I am tired, I'm strained. Leave me alone. So what we can do is realize that we do have to get something in. Protein is helpful for us. It is an important thing. So I can do powders and drinks as much as I can. I can do semi-solids like eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. Yes, I actually have a client who eats cottage cheese when they're sick. It's happened to him twice when he had COVID. So other people eating cottage cheese will probably make you sick. Cheese sticks, just really anything that's not meat. It's probably, if you try to eat meat, your body's most likely going to say no, because meat is complex and it takes effort to break down. Now, if you can eat meat, awesome, get it in. If you can eat some, fish or shrimp or whatever, but if somebody's sick and I tell you to cook fish, you're probably going to throw up just from the smell of it, let alone trying to actually eat it. So you can do drinks, you can do powders, you can do like the semi-solids like we said, but the idea is to aim for at least 0.6 grams per pound of lean body weight. So what this means is, if I say I weigh 200 pounds, but I'm like, it's kind of a chunky 200 pounds. If I were kind of like looking lean on the beach, maybe I'd actually weigh about like 180. So you would eat 0.6 times 180. So you'd eat 108 grams of protein. So that's essentially what you would look to do is, okay, well, how much would I weigh if I was, six-pack abs on the beach? Whatever you think that weight would be, multiply it by 0.6, then that's the number of grams of protein you're going to aim for as like your minimum. So we knew our calorie minimum was 70%. We now know our protein minimum is 0.6 grams per pound of lean body weight. A good way to think of what is my lean body weight. If you had to take a big fat guess, how much would you weigh if you were walking around the beach with a six-pack? Okay? Now, six-pack abs, not six-pack of beer. Then the other thing we want to look at is timing. Timing, you're not going to want a big meal when you don't feel well. So you're going to look at grazing. You're just going to have small little bits all day. That's kind of the way to do it. That eases digestive stress and the resistance to food. It lessens the resistance your body will send you, because if you're just putting in a little bit here and there, a little bit here and there, the body's not too annoyed by you. But if you try to put in like Thanksgiving dinner, boom, it's not going to happen. Your body's going to tell you, leave it alone. So that's our kind of focal point when it comes to nutrition, is know your calorie minimums, which is 70%, know your protein minimum, which is 0.6 grams per lean pound of body weight, and then it's okay to graze all day. Just have little bits all day and just get in what you can. If you can hit those minimums, that's awesome. What do we do about training? Well, if you have a fever, it is recommended to not work out, because workouts can raise your body temperature. If your body temperature is already up, probably not a good idea. Now, I have worked out with a fever before because I don't take my own advice. And you just get a pounding headache and you feel like crap. So I don't really recommend it. Can you go for a walk? Sure, maybe. But if you have a fever, it's probably a good idea just to, not do anything that day. Maybe watch videos, read something, listen to an audiobook or a podcast to, invest into yourself maybe that day knowledge-wise. But you might want to take the day off physically. Now, if you don't have a fever and you feel like you can do something without vomiting everywhere, you can lessen the volume or you can lessen the intensity, but try not to lose both. So what this means is, if I would normally do 3 sets of my exercises, maybe I'll do a couple warm-ups and just do 1 working set, move on to the next exercise. So that's a reduction in volume. Or you could reduce intensity, where maybe last time I did 3 sets of 80 pounds, maybe this time I'll just do 3 sets of 60, and that's good enough. So you can lessen the volume, the amount of sets and reps you do, or you can lessen the intensity, which is the weight load that you do. But I wouldn't recommend losing both. Is if you do 1 set of 60 rather than 3 sets of 80, is 1 set of 60 better than nothing? Yes. So relative to 0, anything you do is a good idea. But if you're like, okay, well, what are some structural things, what some ideas I can have, would be is to either lessen volume or lessen intensity, but try not to lose both. And that's a good motivator, where it gives you a little bit of a less workout, especially if you're not eating properly with calories and protein. You're eating at those minimums. You're not going to need a full blast workout. So doing kind of a quote-unquote minimum of a workout is a really good idea, a good way to kind of match that up. Then the next question is, well, what happens if I screw all this up? Just recognize that a few days doesn't make or break your goals. If you're working at a goal that's just generally you want to lose fat over time. You want to build muscle and build strength over time. You want to just be your best self over time. Then recognize that whatever you're working towards is likely going to take months, if not years. And let's think of, okay, if there's 365 days in a year, even if I miss a whole week, even if I'm sick for a whole week, I mess up my food, I mess up my training, that's only 2% of a whole year. So you're only missing 2% of the whole process. So it's not that bad of a thing. You're not going to make or break your whole dreams because you missed 1 week of training and nutrition. Now, get it in if you can, because one of the motivators I think of is I'm likely going to screw up on other days of the year. Good, faith in myself. So if I can control something, I'm going to control it. If I have the chance to eat better, but I'm just kind of being lazy, then I'll talk myself into doing it. If I have a chance to exercise when being lazy, I'll try to talk myself into doing it. So if I can control it, because I could possibly screw up some other days throughout the year. But if you can't control it, just keep it in perspective. And by keeping it in perspective, understanding that even a whole week is only 2% of the year, then that allows that, say 7 days to stay only 7 days. Because you're not going to think you just screwed up everything and now all hope is lost, and you lose all of the days because you quit. So don't quit. Just because you miss a week, just because you miss 2 weeks, even a month, don't quit. Don't quit. You're still going to be alive after these weeks and months. If you are alive, you're going to want to continue to move forward, not regress. So don't quit. Just get back on doing what you can, when you can, and just get back to moving forward. Okay? So, if you're sick, what can we do? Well, hit 70% of your normal calorie intake, hit 0.6 grams per pound of lean body weight for protein, graze throughout the day, make sure it's pretty even timing throughout the day, move if you can, but if you can't, learn. Watch videos, read, listen to audiobooks, podcasts. If you're worried about the day, just be productive in some way, in any way. Just do something that invests into the process, whether that's a physical investment or a knowledge investment. Maybe you're listening to today's podcast, so just do something and that will help you feel better. So hopefully this helped, gave us some framework to put around like what we should focus on and what we can kind of motivate ourselves to do. I hope that's helpful. If you do like our podcast, please consider sharing it. The whole idea of the podcast is just to help everybody who listens. I want to help you learn how to live a healthier and happier life based on whatever I do know. So learned a lot over the years from formal education and then also working with a lot of clients and just doing this stuff myself. So hopefully there's some value in these podcasts. I appreciate you listening to them. And we all appreciate it if you'd share it. And I'm sure whoever you share it with would appreciate it. So thank you to those who do that. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast, which you can now do on our website. We have an option there for one-time kind of donation. You can do a monthly donation, yearly donation. The podcast is over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. I would love to keep this thing going, and I'm going to work my butt off to keep doing it. So I appreciate any financial help towards the hosting costs. It all goes directly there. So thank you very, very much for your support. I truly appreciate it. If you like the information we share on our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know, let us know at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.